And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Bubba the Bloom, episode 92. Going to talk some NFBC Draft and Hold strategy. We hinted at it a few weeks ago. Here we are. Time to break it down for you. But before we get to that, you can find me on Twitter at BDNtrick, the podcast at Bubba Bloom Pod, and my co-host, as always, on Twitter at RyanBHQ with the blue check mark now. Ryan Bloomfield, how are we doing, my friend?
Did it. Took the plunge. Doing good, man. I'm yeah. Guess it worked after one of my things this week. We are prepping for, so on Thursday night's show, we are doing a top 20, I don't know, battle. I don't know, whatever. We're comparing our top 20, which we don't know each other's, for starting pitchers. And I put something out saying, I don't know, these are like the only 6 or 7 true quote unquote aces. Everyone's definition is a little bit different through those names out there. And it was, interesting to get some of that feedback. So that Thursday night episode, that's what prompted that, was prep for that. But for tonight, I don't know, man, I'm just going to sit back, kind of listen to you, because I don't know how to do draft and holds apparently. And you do. As the guy who, so we were in 2 draft and holds together last year. One was the way early Rob DiPietro draft, and then we did one in, I don't know, February or something. Not only did you beat me in both, you actually freaking won both out of 15. You finished in first, which is like, I kind of bust your chops for that because you're humble and you won't say anything, but that's really freaking hard to do. So kudos to that. And I'm just here to kind of figure out what you did.
I'm trying to figure it out still, so we'll work together on this one through it. I kind of told you before the show, like in the end, it's just kind of like hope and pray at the end, because we will talk about many points that we've seen so far in draft season here, because we both did the early one this year with Rob, and I think I have 2 going right now. You're only in one of them, so you'll have 2 completed. I'll have 3 pretty soon. Right.
Listen to this guy. He can't even keep up on how many drafts he's in.
Trying to keep up with both of ours, okay? Because I have Gladiators going on. Like literally on the top screen here, I have 3 draft room tabs open. It's a beautiful time of the year, folks. Some say it's Christmas season. It's draft season. So like I'm loving life right now. It's pretty awesome. But we'll kind of we'll obviously strategy talk. We'll do a post ADP 500 targets here. But then we'll also kind of give insights throughout the show of what we've seen so far, because it's been it's tight. That's all I'm going to say. Like the drafters are very intelligent, even early. Like usually we say early in the season, you might have, some kind of easier leagues per se, but never like they're never easy, but you know what I'm trying to say? Like they get tougher as the season goes on. There might be some value in ADP, this, that, and the other. It's tightening it up real quick, real quick out there. And that's making things very, very tough. But let's just get into it. Let's start talking strategy here. There's many ways to draft. We talk about this all the time. So when you're talking draft and holds, it's 50 rounds. You do not have any fab throughout the season. This is what you ride and die with. You set your lineups like it's NFBC. Offense on Monday mornings and Friday, or Monday before games, Friday before games, bi-weekly. Pitching once a week, Mondays. So you really got to have some depth in these leagues. So how do you go about roster construction, Ryan?
You should be answering all these questions. I should be interviewing you, but
hey, Alan's in the chat. He says, looks like we can comment on Twitter again. Game on. Yes, you can. X is in the house.
Really?
Here we go.
That's
beautiful.
Awesome.
Beautiful. That's great to hear.
Yeah, welcome to the chat, Alan. And we should honor our guest from last week. That was a ton of fun. Before we get into the draft and old thing, a ton of fun with Alan and Corbin Young talking about the forecaster player boxes last week. I'm still laughing over Alan's Jason DeLay box.
If you haven't seen that, go check it out, folks.
Unbelievable. I do have to ask, since you got the hard copy of the forecaster today, Bubba, was your Jason DeLay page urine stained, or did it come out clean?
It's still clean for now. We're good. Okay. My dog hasn't found it yet. Right. So we're good. But yes, wow.
And then Brandon Cruz and Chris Blessing on Thursday. So hope you all are, first off, enjoyed those episodes. Second off, enjoying your forecasters. That was a ton of fun.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. So in terms of like just in general, because with 50 spots that you need, and we'll go a little bit back and forth between like just general strategy for any listeners who are new or haven't even played the format. Try and kind of keep things at a high level, but then also we'll dive a little bit into just like trends that we've seen. Because Bubba, like you said, you've done 3, I've done 2 draft champions. In general, here's how, at least for me, it breaks down. I try to have 3 to 4 of every every infield position. And I say 3 to 4. We'll get to that in a second. But catcher first, second, third, short. Like to have 3 to 4. I like to try and have 11 to 12 outfielders, and then 22 low 20s pitchers. That may or may not add up to 50, but you have to kind of give or take a little bit. Roughly around 22 pitchers, and I try and do, of those 22 pitchers, 14 starters and 8 relievers. That is certainly not, that's just a general rule of thumb for me. It's certainly not hard and fast. There are multi-position guys. There are, like, if you take your first round pick and take a shortstop, maybe you don't need 4 shortstops. Maybe you think that first rounder is a little more stable and you don't need to back up as much. So there's caveats applying there, but 3 to 4 at every position, 10, 11 outfielders, something like that, and then roughly 22 pitchers. How about you?
Yeah, pretty similar. We'll talk about catcher strategy in a minute because that'll vary based on how you attack the position, and that might allow you to have leverage with an extra player somewhere else on your roster when we get into that. But for the most part, it's 3 to 4. This is where multi-position guys come in tremendously handy because if you get some multi-position guys, now you might have the ability to get another pitcher or an extra outfielder or so on and so forth, and you can really make, even if something as simple as Brian McMahon, second base, third base, those 2 positions, MICI, that's huge. Yep. You have a Gavin Lux, second base, outfield, and he's probably going to gain shortstop in season. That's tremendous value. Like that'll get guys bumped up your list. So you got to kind of think about that when you're drafting. But I'm with you. It's usually 3 to 4, give or take, at each position. Outfield, I want to get pretty deep on, like you said, because A, it dries up pretty quick, and B, most are in such platoons that you want the ability to play the matchups bi-weekly. At the same time, we're pretending like our guys are going to be healthy all season right now. Both of us had issues even rostering or fielding we could field a team. They just weren't playing because they're on the IL or something. That's the real tricky part with it. So that's why you want the extra depth pieces because to win your league, it's one thing, and you still need it for your league, but to win it overall, you need as much playing time as physically possible. And this is where it comes in handy. So you want the depth at the positions, especially the outfielders. You're starting 5 outfielders. So you want to have, like in theory, if you're drafting 12 outfielders, that's not even 2.5 for the position, essentially. Like you don't have that much turnover, all things considered. And you can't go too much. You can get a few more, but you can't go too crazy at the position because you want pitching depth. That's my biggest thing. And I'm not the only one in that regard. How you slice it up between starting pitchers and relief pitchers, I think depends a lot on how you attack the position early. If you want to get some aces, it gives you more flexibility to get some of those kind of high-end relievers aren't even closers, just to like fill in spots throughout the season. But you still, at the same time, you want those wins. You need the strikeouts. So it kind of depends on how you build out that team, and we can get into players on that and everything else later. But very similar to you, it's just more of a when you're going through, like on my draft and my DC drafts, I always have the roster grid right next to it. Like I always have that page pulled up because I'm always just analyzing things because it's not always about like, looking at the best like 4 available players or something, however you draft per se. But sometimes you're looking at this going, okay, I still only have like 1 second baseman and we're approaching like round 21. And you go and look at that second base page and it is freaking disgusting. So you better like jump on it quick. That was just an example of a position. It could be almost any position. So it's more about keeping the balance sometimes in the draft than just getting like crazy. That's just my 2 cents. I don't know if you do anything different in that regard.
How do you, so you mentioned roster grid, and that is, so if folks are drafting on NFBC and aren't aware of that, if you're in the draft room, it's a tiny little button. Like it took me like 2 years to even know it was freaking there. But if you're in the draft room in NFBC and you click on, let's see, I'm going to go into the
little grid looking thing next to your roster.
There's a tiny little grid on the top right of your roster, right next to my team, and you click that, and it expands out. Is that what you use to track where you're at with certain positions? Are you writing in your notepad where you're at too, or are you?
This is what I use to track. I look at it primarily. Right now we're in around like 44 or something, so it's just more about just fill in. But I still look at it to make sure. Like I have so much pitching right now. I have more outfielders and pitchers than anybody in the league, but I have multi-position guys all over the place. So that kind of allowed me to have that like desire to get that kind of goofy. doesn't always work out that way. But I literally look at it almost before every pick just to clarify, or before I go start setting cues and stuff. I'm always checking on that just to make sure. Like, 'cause that's the thing. Like, you look at the roster grid right now on my team, I have Josh Young by himself at third base, but Rengifo's got third base eligibility, and I know I have somebody else.
That's my biggest, like, I don't want to say gripe with it. It's a great tool, and I actually I'll actually show what I use to track my team. I use the roster grid to just roughly see where I'm at in terms of like number of my hitter pitcher split with the rest of the league. Like, I think that's pretty important to make sure I'm not like way ahead or way behind in pitchers. Roster grid, you can pull that up and very quickly see at least your number of hitters and pitchers versus the rest of the league. I don't use it much for like individual positions for that reason, that like it shows you've got one third baseman, and you've got, I mean, of course you have Luis Rengifo,
of course,
but he's showing up elsewhere.
I got people enjoying that now. But even looking at that, I should have maybe had another third baseman, but I agree. Like, the pitching thing's big, because if you fall behind in pitching and you're trying to piece it together late, it's going to be a tough season, I have a feeling, unless you really, really, really strike gold somewhere. Like, you have to. Pitching to me is way, way, way more valuable in a DC than most other formats.
Yep. Agreed. And like I said, I shoot for like the low 20s in total pitching, but again, I'm trying to not be the low man or the high man on number of pitchers throughout the draft. So that's what I use that roster grid thing for. For the YouTube crowd, I'm gonna pull this up here. Look, peek behind the curtain.
Ooh, you haven't seen this, folks. Here we go.
I track. So this is a Google. I basically have a Google sheet and a template for each team, a tab for each team. And each team I kind of copy over, but I hard wire the positions in there. So I've got 3 or 4 rows for every single position. I've got all my outfield positions, and I just fill these in with guys as I draft them. On the right side, I've got, again, for the podcast folks, apologies. I'm trying to explain this as well as I can, but on YouTube and the live stream, we can see it. And I've got a whole other column broken out by starters, closers, and pitchers. This is more of an in-season thing, but I've got this. Eventually, this hooks up to stats and Razzball projections and stuff like that. So in season, I can get like where Razzball ranks them for that week, which I think is pretty important. We'll get into in-season stuff a little bit later, but I just keep a quick Google sheet of who I've taken. Anybody in with multi-position, I just kind of bold to get an idea. So like I've got on this sheet, I've got 3 second basemen, but it's Brandon Drury, Ahmed Rosario, Jake Cronenworth. Those guys can move around. Probably need another second baseman, but yeah, that's how I track the roster as I'm kind of going.
Yeah, and I know a lot of guys do sheets or some kind of deal to kind of keep track of theirs because they like their own way of doing it. That's why Bloomfield kind of tongue-in-cheek made fun of my pad, because he wouldn't have been surprised if I said I had a pad for this, because that's how I roll.
Stone and chisel.
Yep, that's how I roll. But yeah, no, I just use the roster grid, and you made the most important point there. It's a big reason is to make sure the pitching, like, you don't want to fall too far behind in that one, because it may sound obvious, but once you start getting into one of these leagues, it's 15 team, 50, was that 750 picks that are going off the board here. Like, you're starting to draft some, like, my queue right now in round 44 for the best pitchers I think that are available are guys I'm praying get like 5 saves this year and just don't, like, can give you ratios, because you laugh now, but there will be weeks where you are pitching these guys because you have no one else to pitch, or all of a sudden one of your guys you thought was a great option, like Drew Smiley or something, he's garbage now, and he's got to go into Coors Field, so you're not even going to think about starting him. And now you're going, yeah, this reliever that might get 3 innings is a lot better chance right about now.
Yep.
So it's a real fun deal. So that kind of leads us into our next part here, like how to attack certain positions. We kind of hinted at pitchers and closers. We can talk about that in a minute. Let's go offensively first here. And it was a listener question as well, but we kind of hinted at earlier. Catchers. I'll let you have the floor first before I take off for the next 45 minutes on it. But how do you attack catchers in the DC format?
I go early and often, which I think is kind of the way to do it in redraft leagues for 2024 anyway, just because there's a really strong catcher pool, like in the top 12, top 14-ish, maybe a little deeper than that too. But I've had teams where you just can't field a catcher and you get or just you're playing a backup catcher because injuries happen. It sets you back so much. So I because playing time is king, but because plate appearances in these draft and holds are king, I am prioritizing catchers with a track record of a lot of playing time. And so like in our current DC, I took JT Realmuto and Keibert Ruiz. I think the interesting thing with catchers is like I said at the top of 3 to 4, like I'm probably only going to have 3 here just because I think the benefit of taking an early catcher in a draft and hold is you don't need to try and backfill with some really crappy second catcher. I think if you wait on catchers, you probably do need to try and backfill and get 4 catchers on your team, just then you can kind of pick the best one for that week. But I think that's a benefit of going early catcher 1 or 2 is I don't think you need 4 catcher slots. And so you can use that 4th catcher slot. I think you need 3 because something will happen, but you can use that 4th catcher slot for a myriad of other needs on your team.
Yep, I'm on the same page. I kind of hinted at it earlier. I think that's the way of the world these days. If you go catcher early, like most are for the playing time, like you mentioned, just because the position's so loaded now, there's kind of a bigger gap than usual between the top, 12 to 14 catchers and the rest. So it really separates things besides just the playing time, the productions. It's wildly different as you like there's a cliff compared to just like a slow decline at catcher, and then they all kind of hang out. There's a cliff at catcher. And I think that's a big part of it. So I'm with you. And it gives you the luxury, like you said, that you can save a roster spot for another position of your choice. Preferably a pitcher or an outfielder was my 2 cents. But you can do whatever you want. And so you get 2 like elite starting guys that you trust. And again, injuries will happen to catchers, so is what it is. And then get 1 backup that you like, see where it goes. Like in the draft I'm in with you, I got Yainer Diaz. We all know my thoughts there. I went and got Bo Naylor. You all know my thoughts there. I think they're going to play 130 to 140 games each. I think they're going to be out there a ton between DH and catching. Like that's their jam. I got Miguel Amaya as the backup. I'm a believer that Miguel Amaya is the best hitter and the best catcher for the Cubs. They played him a lot.
Yep.
As long as they don't sign a guy, though. That's the thing. Like last year, they could have had Amaya back up and given him a shot. They signed Yan Gomes. Gomes was great. Amaya got his moments, though, as the season went on. So if Amaya stays as the main guy, I think it's an awesome like 3rd catcher. Or I could be kind of in a hole. There's a reality there. But at this point in the draft, around 44, the other options are just a wasted roster spot to me right now. So we digress. And if I have an empty catcher spot, I have an empty catcher spot. That's kind of the way of the world, and that's how these fun builds take place. But to the initial catcher question, I have 2 more comments on this, 2 more strategy ways for it. First, you take the 2 elite guys or 2 kind of guaranteed guys like we talked about. The other option, take 1 really good guy, and then you get kind of fishy with like a Jake Rogers or something. You might want to have 2 more backups. You don't have to, but you might want to just because Jake Rogers, as good as he is, can you do it for another full season? The other dynamic, if you want to roll the dice, you kind of punt catchers and kind of focus on that like that 18 to 24 range and just load up on 4 dudes and play the matchups weekly. And that's an ugly scenario, but you could maximize that bats that way. So that is something to think about because you can totally play the matchup games there and hope it pans out. But it's like you're playing with Patrick Bailey, Jake Rogers, those types. And if you're going to try to predict when they go off, good luck. So that's a tricky spot to be in. So I'm with Ryan. I haven't been as aggressive as Ryan. I'm not saying he's wrong for doing it. A lot of guys are even more aggressive. But I've been comfortable. Like I know the top 14 or so guys I really like. I'm leaving with 2. And that's my goal. So that's my strategy so far. And why did that just go off on my screen?
Bunch of balloons just came off on your thing. You already turned 40, man. Screw that.
I have no idea what that was. That was.
Did Alan hack into is that a new Twitter feature too? Or
that was wild.
That was bizarre. Bubba's screen on the live stream just got covered in balloons. So I don't know.
No idea.
So, and this question kind of goes back to this isn't just catcher related, but you mentioned like, yeah, you could wait until like rounds 18 to 24 or whatever and kind of punt catcher. I think if you do that, and again, this goes for any position, the longer you wait in general, I think the longer you wait to get your starter at that position, the earlier you need to get their backup. If that makes sense. So like if you're punting catcher going like rounds 18 to 24, I think you need to get your 3rd and 4th, at least your 3rd, maybe your 4th catcher like early as well. Just because you're gonna need that person, especially at catcher. But I think that's also true at for like your fifth outfielder. For if you wait on second base, again, it's 15-team league, so like you're gonna have to wait on somebody on some.
There's gonna be holes on every team. It's just the reality of it.
And so the longer you wait, like if you wait till the end, if you're the last person in your league, and every league has a last person to take a second baseman, you should be one of the first people to take a second baseman. So
I want to mention just like the draft we're in. I'm not going to give anybody's names, obviously, but if you're looking at the catchers, so starting in round 14, Mitch Garver. Round 15, Luis Campusano, Elias Diaz. Round 16, Danny Jansen, Jake Rogers, Shea Langoliers, Alejandro Kirk, Ryan Jeffers. Then you go all the way to round 20, where you're talking Andy Rodriguez and Austin Wells. If that doesn't sum up why you need to probably take catchers early, I don't know what else to say.
Yep.
Like that's rough. That's rough in a big way. Like I wouldn't mind. I'd be okay with like one of those guys that we talked about, like from round 14 to 18, but not two of them. Like I'm not going to bat with both of them. So, yeah.
Agreed.
Any other offensive positions that you kind of maybe have noticed this draft season or have strategies on like doubling up on? Or you can even combine the same middle infield, corner infield, or stuff like that. Like, is there any strategy so far?
Not really. I mean, the tricky part, at least that I've had so far, is trying to manage multi-position guys, because that is where like second, third, first, shortstop come into play. I always, so this is a shortcoming of mine. I had a bunch of teams last year where I could not field a full 5 outfield. I feel like you need more outfield than you think, especially not only just volume, but I think the position in general in 2024, once you start looking at your 4th and 5th outfielders, it seems to get kind of thin. And so I think you need to kind of start grabbing your 6th, 7th, 8th outfielders earlier than you think. And then, I mean, if you have to wait at some point and get other positions, but like your 10th, 11th, 12th, you can kind of wait till the end. But I feel like those mid-tier outfielders, like your 4th through your 7th, I think you need to hit that in the middle of the draft pretty hard. I just always seem like I'm short on outfield.
Yeah, like I looked at the roster grid, and with multi-position guys, I have 13 outfielders through the first 44 rounds, and I still don't feel comfortable because it's a horror story as the season goes on. It's tricky.
And it's tough because it's a little bit of a mindset change from Fab Leagues. In Fab Leagues, like there's usually outfielders, there's usually bats that are available in Fab every week that you can stream for that week or whatever. There's bodies. There are not starting pitchers at all in Fab, but obviously this isn't Fab. So like I don't know. I just feel like I need more hitters than I think, but could just be my perception.
No, well, and it also makes sense because I believe it was one of the leagues we played in last year. There was a point in the season you drafted Ronald Acuna Jr., but you had so many injuries. You couldn't even it was insane. So that's probably why you have like a horror story in your brain going, I need more bats. I need more bats.
You mean my team, I drafted Acuna and Strider and it didn't cash.
Yeah, that's how but I just wanted to bring that up, not to throw it in your face, but for listeners, like that's why these DCs are tough. Like you could get a good team, but it turns into survival of the fittest at one point in time. Like that's just what it'll turn into. And it's tough. Like there's obviously a ton of great strategy. There's a ton of great players in DC. Steve Weimer is one of the best DC players out there. There's many, many more, but it's a lot of just, the safe plays. I love the safe plays, to be totally honest. That's just kind of my strategy. Many ways to go about it. Let's talk about pitching though. We'll start with starting pitching though for fun, because I kind of hinted at it earlier. There's a couple ways to, I think, go about starting pitching if you want to. How do you prefer to go about starting pitching? Because there's the ace is going to ace strategy. There's pocket aces. There's, let's wait and see because there's a big glob coming up. How do you approach starting pitching?
Especially this year, I really want to get one in my first 3 rounds, at least, usually first 2 rounds, just because I kind of what I said at the top, feel like there's a pretty soft, like true SP1 in 2024. There's maybe only 6 or 7 of those guys. I feel like you need to, I feel like in rounds like 6 through 10, I think you need to bolster that rotation. I think you need to bolster that rotation and kind of volume your way through, especially early in draft season like this is, like we're recording in December, like injuries are going to happen to starting pitchers. It's just going to happen in spring and then throughout the season. You need to have, and it's kind of funny, I just said this about outfielders, you need to have a ton of starting pitching. And it's tricky because unlike position players, so I just got a text like, should I draft Lance Lynn in the 23rd round or whatever? With starting pitchers, like you can do a ton of damage with bad starting pitchers. So it's just like very risky, I think, to wait on starting pitching. I think it needs to be a priority and then focus on, because something has to give, focus on bats that pile up plate appearances and that are quote unquote safer from a playing time standpoint, and prioritize, get that anchor in the first 2-3 rounds. And then, in my opinion, pile up like 6 through 10 with starters, because you're just going to need that volume.
Yep. Yeah, I'm with you. It's like it's like my strategy almost in redraft too is I want 1, maybe 2 of the aces in the first, maybe not ace, but high end talents in the first 5 rounds. So I stick with that here. Some guys go way more aggressive. Some kind of let it go, because there is a glob if you're willing to go from like round 6 to 12 or so. There's some really good pitchers. Just are they going to finish elite enough to match up with the big guys? That's the $1 million question. So it makes it interesting, and it kind of goes to the point, if you are more aggressive, if you go pocket aces, or you make sure you get a couple big time aces early, maybe you can take a little break and attack more like rounds 10 through 15 and load up on bats per se, instead of having to get that middle round. So then you have to look at the player pool in the ADP world and see what are the bats looking like in 10 through 15 compared to 6 through 10. It's like it's 3D chess. That's just the name of the game, is how do you decipher it all? And it makes it tough. I kind of just bob and weave is the best way I can say it. There's like no formula, except in the end, like Ryan said, is I want a lot of starting pitching if I can. If not, I just load up on so much relief pitching. It's stupid at times. So that's me.
How do you, and we have a point to talk about like prospects versus veterans a little bit later. We can kind of go there now. Like, how do you fill out the back end of your starting pitcher? So like, I tend, because I just made the point how like you don't want 160 innings of freaking Patrick Sandoval destroying your ratios. What I've done a little bit more this year, like, is go with the prospects on the pitching side. And maybe that's an overreaction to what we saw in 2023. But like my last 5 pitchers in our current draft and hold are either prospects or injured guys that I'm counting on maybe something in the second half. So I've got AJ Smith-Shawver, Max Meyer, Robert Gasser, DeGrom, and Christian Scott. Guys who, like, their playing time is sketchy as hell. Again, this is, that's not a murderer's row, but this is my like SP 10 through 14. I feel like on the pitching side, I'm leaning more prospects and less like I'm leaning into the playing time uncertainty, just because playing time certainty on the pitching side isn't always a good thing if they're not good.
Yes and no for me. I want to know that they can throw innings. Then again, if like you can get a DeGrom now and not need him in your lineup until someone else gets hurt, and you can use him in the middle of the season when he comes back, that's tremendous. And so that is a strategy that'll take place in these drafts compared to other leagues. Like if you look at my last, 5 picks pitching wise, Luis Medina, who we talked about a lot last year, big upside arm, struggled at times. Like, what are we going to get? I'm willing to take a chance. Alec Marsh, he finished the season like the last month of the year as a strikeout machine for Kansas City. Looked amazing. Watch if he can carry that over. Lucas Erceg is supposed to be the guy that might compete with Mason Miller if Mason Miller struggles. Well, I had Mason Miller earlier, so I got backed up to get the 12 saves that the A's get this year. And then I went Martin Perez and Adrian Hauser, 2 boring-ass veterans, but the guys do not kill your ratios, and they'll throw a bunch of innings. So it's one of those kind of combination things of, I guess, to the question you asked, I'm kind of more safe in the regards I want the innings. I don't want the unproven dudes. But I took Drew Thorpe like 5 pitchers before that. But he's also a guy that threw like almost 140 innings in the minors last year. So that's just a dynamic in my head. Like last year when we talked about like the Guardians guys, Tanner Bybee and everything, they had the workload before they got called up. There's other guys that haven't. That's the question mark. your guys pretty much have the workload, so that's fine. But I've always been the more cautious guy. I've always been wrong on prospects, so I usually kind of go with I have Steven Matz on this team. Like, is he great? No, but we know who he is. Like, there's just things like that. And then I just load up on a bunch of relievers. So when I don't want to pitch those guys, I don't. It's that simple.
Absolutely.
So,
Alan in the chat mentioned we mentioned Steve Weimer, and yes, shout out to Steve. He's one of the best draft and hold players out there. One of the things he does especially well is maximizing at bats and innings pitched. Yep. Absolutely,
he's a genius at it. Carlos Marcano. I guess we can stop real quick here since we're talking pitchers. Thoughts on Taj Bradley? Is he better for draft and holds or for main event type leagues?
Ooh, I would say main event type leagues because it could go real south real quick, and you can just cut bait.
Yep.
Yeah. I have some reservations about. I mean, it could be a separate thing, but I have some reservations about Mr. Bradley himself. But I think that is an example of in his case, it could work, but I think that's an example of someone who could do a lot more harm than good near the end of your rotation. I feel like the Rays sending him down, they kind of knew something we didn't. The Bradley we saw when he came back midseason was a shell of what we saw early on.
And yeah, because we talk dead roster spots like hinting at injuries. Just a bad pitcher can be a dead roster spot because you're never.
I'd rather have a dead,
an injured guy
roster spot.
Yeah,
not a dead guy.
That's the difference.
Yeah.
Then Carlos also mentioned, and Carlos is an Oakland Athletics fan.
Yes.
He says Mason Miller would finish the year as the A's closer. I have no proof, but no doubts either. I'm with you. I've been drafting him in every league as the closer, so I'm 100% on board with you, Carlos. Let's do it. I've been pounding that drum for a while. Put him in the bullpen. Let's see what happens, AJ Puck style.
I don't know, man. The A's did sign Trevor Gott today.
So. You got to be kidding me. Oh. I had to. Too easy.
We'll move on.
Easy.
That was terrible.
Speaking of closers, let's talk closers. I draft a bunch of relievers. How do you approach closers? Because everyone goes, man, they're getting drafted too high. Well, it's because draft and hold, you have no fab. You got to get the guys that are closers. That's the name of the game, because if you want to compete for the overall, you got to have saves. If you want to win your league, you still need some, maybe not as much as the others, but you still need some. But to win the overall, which is the big reason a lot of guys play DCs, you got to, and I don't. I just want to win the league. It's that simple. But how do you approach closers?
Yeah, the prices seem shocking, but if everyone's paying them, it's not really that high of a price.
Nope.
It's market value. And you will need to, for those that are new to the format, you will need to pay up. So this ADP I've got on my sheet's a little outdated, but there are 6 closers going in the first 5 rounds as of at least a few weeks ago. In the first 7 rounds, there are 14 closers. So basically everybody has a closer on average in the first 7 rounds. And then your next 15 around the 18th round. So everyone has 2 closers, well, on average, 2 closers by the 18th round, but everyone also has their number 1 by the 7th round. What I typically try and do, and I think that's not going to, this is what we saw last year. If you recall our reliever review episode, the stability at the top of the closer pool last year just means the closer prices for 2024 are going to be just as high. So I am getting 2 closers in the first 12-ish rounds, and then I'm kind of not really touching it again until much later. So in my current draft, I started Joan Duran and then Craig Kimbrell after he signed in the first 12 rounds. And then I waited for a while, Gregory Santos, Jason Foley, and I'm just going to take a bunch of shots here in these last few rounds on just spec guys. But that's kind of how I handle it. 2 early ones, and take your medicine, get the saves, and go from there.
Yeah, I played chicken in this one, and it worked out well. I got Alexis Diaz early, Clay Holmes. I got was a round 3, Clay Holmes in round 10, and then I got Mason Miller around 15. So I kind of played that dance, and that is not the current DC that I'm in. I got hung out to dry on that one. I told Ryan earlier what I ended up doing in that draft, and it's definitely not the same. I got Edwin Diaz early on, and then round 13 and 14, I went Jose Leclerc, Jose Alvarado. Not ideal, but I'm on the turn, and we'll talk about KDS in a minute because that is a big point of my contention in DCs right now. And it might be the same in 15-team fab leagues, but yeah, closer-wise, I want at least 1 elite guy. I've been doing that every time. Between the top 5 rounds, I better have at least 1 elite dude. and then be smart to have 2 by the end of round 10. So you might have to go earlier, kind of like how Ryan said, round 8 or so, and then piece it together from there. But like I will say is I'm very aggressive on relievers in general. If I don't like a starting pitcher, I'll take a reliever, then I'll go take a different dude later type thing for pitching. Like I mentioned, I took Adrian Hauser and company. So I'll take a ton of guys I think might have a chance. Like I took James MacArthur in round 22. AJ Puck, I think wouldn't be shocked if he closes again in round 25. Those are kind of the angles. Griffin Jacks, who I love, talked about him on a bench with Bubba at round 32. And then I start loading up on different relievers. So that's my philosophy on the closers. Get at least 1 elite one early, hopefully 2 by the end of round 10, maybe earlier, as Ryan mentioned, and go from there.
Will you we haven't talked about handcuffing yet.
I wrote that down as you were talking.
Oh,
about
you
the
did?
question mark right here. Yep.
Because like I have at times dictated taking my closer based on who has the best setup man, and then taking said setup man later in the draft. Sometimes that works if the incumbent gets traded or gets hurt and the setup man just slides right in. A lot of times it hasn't. How do you handle specifically at closers, but also, I mean, other positions too? Like if you take a big time bat, will you grab their backup later on?
The bats wise, usually not. That's just the way of the world, especially when we talk about how many outfielders you draft after the first like 50 or 60 outfielders. They're almost all platoon guys anyways. So that gets nasty as it is. If you start taking platoon guys and potential handcuffs, that's trouble. Like if you want to take a prospect handcuff later on, maybe. Okay, I see your angle there. Hoping a guy gets traded or a roster spot opens for him, but I'm not big there. Pitching wise, depends on the closer. Like I'm not taking Edwin Diaz's handcuff, but like I mentioned, I took Lucas Urseg just in case something happens to Mason Miller. I'll take my chances. Might not ever pitch Lucas once in this, but like I took AJ Puck. Tanner Scott's got the gig. I still think AJ Puck's great. I took Hector Neris. I know Brian Abreu's in the way and Ryan Presley, but Hector Neris, elite stuff. Maybe he'll run into some saves. That's kind of the angle I go with. Like I don't purposely go to handcuff, but I kind of agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, and as the point has been made as well, like even if they don't get saves, they can at least help a little bit with ratios. I also think like a Brusdar Gratterall type,
Love him.
like getting somebody who isn't the prime closer, but is on like a fractured-ish bullpen. So like Gratterall, I think got 5 saves last year. You can get 5 to 10 from someone. I think that works really well in Gladiators as well, like in the last 100%. Round or whatever. Because draft and hold, it can be tough to time when that person gets their saves, but I think that's a viable option as well.
Yeah, I'm doing that in the Gladiator. We're not doing a Gladiator show, so I won't break down that team, but I basically did that with my last few pitcher picks, 100% with you on that one. But, yeah, there's a lot to be done about taking, like, Gratterall. I love it. That's why I like Griffin Jacks. He'll get you 4 or 5 saves, but elite ratios, strikeouts, and God forbid something happened to Johan Duran, Jack should be the dude.
Don't speak
I don't want it to happen. I'm not a prophet. I'm not a prophet.
Where'd you get Jacks again?
Like around 32 or something. I love Griffin Jacks.
I feel like that is because you don't want to spend too much. Yeah, you got him in 32nd round. You like handcuffing. You don't want to spend too much on that second cuff. I don't even know if there's a first cuff or second cuff.
Yeah, you got to do some research before you bring the cuffs in.
We've been handcuffed.
Yeah.
We'll move. We'll stay on the fantasy baseball track. But like I feel like a Duran Jacks handcuff in Minnesota strong. Like this year makes a ton of sense.
Well, especially the way Baldelli does things is like he has proven in the past he'll use his best pitcher in matchup spaces. Like it's not always strictly closers. Last year seemed more closer based, but we've seen in years past where he will fluctuate things around. That gives a Jacks guy credit. That's why the Philadelphia bullpen could be a lot of fun. We'll talk about one of their pitchers later. But there's like 4 options. You wouldn't be shocked if all of them had at least 5 saves in that bullpen. Like those kind of pins are interesting, and those are fun for draft and holds. I think to kind of mix and match those kind of situations for sure.
We've got Anthony Gialdi, Kansas City Moose in the draft. Missed you tonight in the Tuesday night tussle Gladiator draft. I'm not surprised, Mr. Gialdi, you were in there, but welcome on in. Anthony Gialdi also says the Brian Abreu helium is out of hand. So all what we're saying here is probably pretty, I don't know, mainstream strategies or getting popular strategies because those types of guys are going a little bit earlier than I've seen in recent years.
100%. Let's talk about some miscellaneous tips per se. And I'm going to start with the one I wrote down that it's not even on the list. Let's just do KDS real quick. In years past, I'm doing it this year is because I know that to me, I'm not saying crazy things, but I know the player pool, so I'm comfortable wherever. Like, obviously, I prefer to have one of the top picks, but it is what it is. I might change that this year, though, especially in 15-team leagues. I hate being on the ends. Absolutely hate it. Now, if you're first, you get Acuna, that's awesome. Okay, you suck it up. But the back end around one, like the 15th pick, which I have in my other DC I'm doing, it's okay early on, but then you miss out on runs, and that's how you get hosed on the closers things. That's how you get hosed on the key positional things where you need the depth pieces in 15-team, 50-round drafts where you can maybe vary in a fab league. In these DCs, that end pick sucks in my mind. I'd prefer like the top guy or give me like 7 through 10, something like that.
Agreed. The other thing, so I haven't really done deep dives on which KDS slots I like for this year yet. Just not there yet. But just some general like thoughts is yes, being on the end and missing those runs is brutal, but also in a draft and hold specifically, and that maybe this is just me, but like being on the end, you get so detached from the draft. In a draft and hold, if you're in a 2-hour or 4-hour, you make your 2 picks or whatever on the wheel, and like you go back to work or you do whatever you do throughout your day. Like all this time passes, you get the email that you're up again, and it's like, holy crap, what the hell just happened? I need to catch up on these 30 guys who were just taken, and you're just not as involved in the cadence of the draft for draft and holds if you're on the end. So in draft and holds, I like to be in the middle just because I use draft and holds a lot as prep for the industry leagues, the bigger money leagues or whatever in March. And so I just like to I don't like to feel left out, man. I like to feel part of the draft and be, get that cadence and be more involved in the regular day-to-day of a draft and hold.
Why you do multiple drafts at once. So you're always
cadence. That's my other tip. Do not do that. If anyone remembers on the Gladiator episode, I pulled up the wrong draft. And so like,
yeah, that was fun stuff, but I'm with you. It does. 'Cause like I'm on the end and I'll get the update that I'm on deck and I have to literally go back and spend time.
And you're like, who's the 25 guys that just went? And you're not really analyzing those guys. You're just crossing them off a list or whatever. And like, I don't know, you don't really gain from that. A couple other KDS things just in general. I like to just draft from different spots, like just to get a feel for what the market is at different places. And then also, this is probably pretty mainstream advice, but like, I don't even care that much about the first round KDS. I base my KDS off who might be available in rounds 2 through 4, because they're all good in the first round. It's who do you want in those 2 through 4 rounds that fits best with who might be available in the first.
100%. It's something that Ryan does very well, planning it, like trying to plan out the draft, and it's a big difference. And that's another reason why I hate 15, because God, it's just. Like I'll just give you, for instance, we won't go too deep, but the draft I'm in right now where I'm at 15, I went J-Ram and Seager, which I love, but then it comes back to me. I got Kirby and Edwin Diaz. Okay, cool. But now I went and drafted Josh Lowe, who I have 0 shares of, but the outfield pool, I had no outfielders yet. So there's the fun. And felt like I was forcing picks. Let's just put it that way. And not as happy about it. Not as happy in my mind.
Never a good feeling.
No, but it's something we also talked about before the show is one takeaway. If you take a couple things away from here, just know in any draft, a 15-team draft, but especially a DC, there's going to be a lot of uneasy feelings. And you just want to have, like, in the end, you want to have like a complete kind of core, is what I'm going to say. Like, you could have the depth, have the pieces in play that you can shift things around. That's all I'm going to say, because there's going to be a lot of things that go crazy throughout the season, and you'll be surprised who shows up for you in the end. That'd be my 2 cents on that one.
Mickey Moniak.
Yeah, that was a huge one.
I do remember, that's somewhat of an inside joke, but I remember this was on the early draft that you won, Bubba, but it was like, I forget when exactly. It was maybe May, something like that. And every single hitter you had was injured on your bench except for Mickey Moniak. And I don't know if Moniak was a huge target for you entering the season, whatever, but like you had to put him in out of necessity, and that's when he
played well.
turned into Mickey Maniac.
Yep, it worked out. So never say never, folks. Timing of backups. This kind of goes to, I guess, your feel for the depth of the position. We kind of hinted at, like, look at the roster grid and realize, hey, maybe it's time to add some more backups here, left, right, and center type thing. When do you feel kind of a necessity to get backups, I guess?
Yeah, I threw this on there because this was just something that happened in my current draft that I thought was a pretty interesting talking point. So I already made the point earlier is like it's kind of an inverse. The later you take your starter at a certain position, the earlier you want to grab that backup and just to have that balance. So the opposite of that's true. Like if you take an early stud, and in this case, I'm going to use Austin Riley as my case study here. I took Austin Riley in the second round of our current draft and hold. It's like, yeah, I know I need to draft a third baseman. I know I need to draft backups, but I drafted Austin Riley. Like I can wait a long time, presumably. Now watch him get hurt in spring or whatever, but I can wait a long time to start grabbing any backup third baseman. And so what I did with this is, and why we're calling this kind of the timing of the backups, I did like a two-pronged approach, saying if Austin Riley gets hurt, I want my two backups. And since I took Riley so early, these backups honestly are not going to be that good or have playing time questions or whatever. I want to pair these guys so where the timing might work out, that one guy might be available early in the year and the other guy available in the second half. So what I did was I backed up Austin Riley with Kobe Mayo, prospect in Baltimore, who is probably not going to be up on opening day and likely midseason at some point. My third backup is Andrew Monasterio, who I don't even know think he's that good, but it was like the 40th round, and he's currently the starter for Milwaukee at third base. And so the general kind of strategy is to time that together to where Monasterio at least has a gig in the first half of the season, and then Kobe Mayo comes in the middle of the year, gets called up. Again, this is all theoretical. Who knows if it'll work? But I think being able to kind of time your backups is an interesting strategy. And to be able, we talked about that like prospect versus veteran. I think if you can kind of mix that up, your veterans are probably more likely to play early in the season when they're healthy and have a job. Your prospects more likely to play in the second half. So if you can kind of mix those two together, you can maybe piece together a solid backup plan behind your stud hitters at each position.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. It's definitely a strategy that I need to employ because I only have Josh Young if I'm not using multi-position guys right now. So that's definitely something I have to keep in mind as I'm building my third base. So I like the idea behind that is how do you kind of piece it all together in that scenario, because it's kind of like the catcher's example. Like if you take two really good catchers, I need to like focus crazily on backups, not as much. But it's at the same time, like say you waited on, I keep using second base, but say you waited on second base and now you got one of the later kind of guys you trust at second base. Like you said earlier, maybe you get a little more aggressive on backing them up. I guess it's kind of, so it's a case by case basis. Is kind of what we're saying.
Yep, with someone presumably that you don't need to have to try and time and have major questions with that better backup.
What are you doing with your draft queues?
I suck at this, man. I suck at this. Always set a queue. Always have something ready to go. I got timed out. I think it was our Gladiator on Friday night just because the timing wasn't there and I didn't have a queue set up, and just it's super easy in NFBC, and this may seem very obvious, but at least just throw a few guys that you're interested in. You can also and if anyone has questions on this, you can hit me up. You can preload your entire draft list through like a file that you can download and upload. And that way, at least like if life happens, whatever your meetings or something happens, you get autoed, like you at least don't get stuck with, who's this year's Yennier Cano or Max Scherzer or whatever. There will be more to that list, but that's something I always could do better on. And then again, NFBC veterans will know this, but your draft clock, and at least in the NFBC for draft and hold, it gets cut in half after the 30th round to speed things up. So if you join a 4-hour league, it's 2 hours after the 30th round, and then a 2-hour league is 1 hour. And that 1 hour, man, it can catch you up. The clock stops from 1 to 6 Pacific,
Eastern
10
time.
to 6
Eastern time. It starts at 5 our time, so 8. It's like What is it, like 1 to 8 or something like that?
Something like that in the middle of the night. But even that, like, I don't know, stuff happens. So.
Oh yeah, if you decide to actually maybe do something and not wake up first thing and go check your computer on a weekend, you will get burned. And because like we say this because I was telling Ryan before the show, there's like one of my drafts. I'll go to bed knowing I'm 3 picks away, and they're all East Coast guys. I'm just like praying I wake up in time to make a pick. And I set a queue, but even when you set a queue, you're sitting there going like, well, I probably would have still done it differently because different little factors. And I enjoy another thing is the app is not good for drafting. So I use the internet off like the Safari on my phone, use the real draft room. But when you're in the draft room on your phone, you can't move the queue around. I've never been able to do that. So something to think about when you set it up. The queue's nice when you're scrolling through and you can see things, but you can't adjust. At least I haven't been able to figure out how to adjust it on my phone.
Anthony Gialdi in the chat. 1 a.m. to 9 a.m. Eastern, it pauses. So yeah, 10 from the West Coast, 10 to 6. So thanks for that. Yes, if anyone has the NFBC app on your phone, and the NFBC folks will tell you this themselves, delete it. Don't just not use it, but delete it. So it defaults to the web browser version, which is mobile friendly.
And the last thing I'll mention is you're talking about plugins and versions. So Gialdi's saying it won't move on mobile either, or app, or via browser. Well, there you go. Problem solved. What do you have for another plugin thing? Because I don't even use this. I'm curious.
All right, this is something I forget where I found it, but it is pretty useful. There's a Google Chrome plugin. I think Firefox has it too. And this is more for in season. NFBC, for whatever reason, they don't do this. Great site, my favorite platform. But when you go to set your lineups before lock, you don't know who's in the lineup or not. And so if you're staring at a roster, especially in draft and holds, like in Fab Leagues, you're more in tune with, like you just did Fab, you just pick these guys up, you're more in tune with what your team is. In season with these draft and holds, I'm speaking for myself, I'm sure it's true for others, I lose track on who the hell I've got on what team, and like someone gets hurt and then 3 weeks later, it's not obvious that I need to put them back in. There is a browser plugin. I think it's called NFB, and I should have looked this up before. It's called NFBC Enhancement. You can look it up in the Google Store or on Firefox. And what it'll do is it scans the MLB lineups in real time and gives a little green indicator with the lineup slot that your hitter's in if he's in the lineup, and a red indicator if he's out of the lineup. And so this is something I picked up midseason last year. I'm probably late to the party, but
I didn't even know it existed, so I'm a fan.
So there you go. It just saves you so much time. You can quickly, that last hour or whatever, if you've got 4 or 5 draft and hold teams or whatever, make sure you've got all green in your starting lineup and red on your bench. And then if there's any green on your bench, and this is what I was just talking about, like if you've got a guy out for 3 weeks, all of a sudden he's back in, it's very easy to see that, and then you can move him back in. So it's just a huge time saver if you're going through multiple lineups. Staring at a roster of 50 names is like death to your eyes. But that plugin that will tell you with color coding, green and red, who's in or who's out, is super, super helpful in season.
I will need to check that out. Colored me intrigued. Any other strategy stuff here? Because we went over a lot of things. There's probably a million more things we didn't go over. So first, I'll say hit us up on Twitter if you want, or put comments on the YouTube page or wherever, and we'll definitely get back to you. But anything else that comes to the top of your mind now, besides my biggest thing, is just have depth, guys. Depth, and then battle the injuries. That's all I can say. I
would so a couple resources. So to what you were just saying, Bubba, about depth, we were joking about it before, but like once if you haven't done draft and holds before, once it gets to like the 30th round, it is brutal. Mm-hmm. It is brutal, the player pool. I think if you want to succeed in draft and holds, you need to not only, of course, dominate the middle rounds. That's my spiel every year. But you need to know, at least you need to have a pretty robust target list at the end of drafts for those last 20 rounds. Not to blow smoke, but Bubba, your episodes with Chris Clegg and Eric Cross talking about 2024 relevant prospects is super helpful. I went through that episode and just bolded everyone most people they listed. I kind of followed up with a little bit of my own stuff, but bolded a lot of the names that they brought up late in drafts. And then with the bullpen guru with Dom Rello talking about relievers and kind of save spec stashes, that was really good. There's also an episode prospect wise with Matt Thompson.
Yep.
On the Deadpool Hitter podcast, and similar to what you did with Clegg and Cross, Matt, who knows, I really trust his evaluations with Prospects Live. He went through kind of a similar exercise of 2024 prospects to get out there. So apologies if I'm missing others out there. Lucas Beery put out something, I believe, for the FTN Draft Guide that was pretty good as well, in terms of not just like general strategy, but for names as well. So those are a few resources you can check out for names in those last 20 rounds, because you're going to need them. You're going to need names.
Literally, that's you're going to need lots of names. I'm looking at positions right now to try to
I'm running out of names in ours in the 45th.
You get to the point, it's like the old game, baseball player or politician, and you're trying to guess which one they are, because it's wild, and that's the fun of it. So let's have some fun with it. Post 500 ADP, and literally there's probably a million different answers. Depends on who you like. It's more of a feel thing, a like thing here, because you're throwing darts at the wall, and some of these guys you're not as darty. They make sense. Other ones you're sitting there kind of like trying to make a case for it and make you feel good when you draft it, thinking, okay, this makes sense. So we'll have some fun here. We're getting towards the end of the show, so we'll kind of rock through this, but we'll go back and forth each position, Team Bubba, Team Bloom. We'll see how this does. Hopefully it's better than Ryan's DCs last year. But let's start at the catcher position. And I had to. It took me almost an hour to get one out. Give me some credit there. If you're watching the video, Bloom's stabbing himself in the heart. This is what we do. This is what friends do, folks. This is what we do. So I'll let you on the floor, Ryan. Who's your catcher post 580?
Then you're going to make me go first. I can't come back from that.
Oh, you can't. I got faith in you.
Total shot. So yes, this is all post 500 ADP guys, which is like the 33rd round. Some of these guys are like 40th rounds. I tried to at least piece together guys from who even have like 600, 700. Ben Rice, who I will admit had not really heard of before draft season. I think Clegg and Cross recommended him on your show as well. Catcher for the New York Yankees. The prevailing wisdom is that Wells will be the starter. Maybe that happened, maybe it doesn't, but Clegg and Cross are very high on Ben Rice as a dark horse to actually take that role. Maybe not out of the gates, but at some point during the season, Ben Rice, who had put up some really, really good numbers for the Yankees in Double-A last year, 16 homers, 7 steals in 222 plate appearances in Double-A. Who knows what that translates to the majors, but I think Ben Rice is at least a stab in the 40-something odd round that he's going in. Fourth catcher.
Definitely a fourth catcher. My guy's probably a fourth catcher as well. That's Max Stassi. Obviously didn't play in 2023. We've seen the power upside, some batting average skills, but health has been an issue. The only reason I'm really bringing him up is a combination of ADP 668 over the last month of drafts and the Chicago White Sox, because when it talks to Lee, they got Corey Lee set up to catch, and there's prospect excitement behind Corey Lee, but it really hasn't panned out. So the second he might fall apart, Stassi's the dude, and he's proven that at least he can, has a track record of playing every day when healthy. So I like Max Stassi quite a bit.
I do too. I don't think he will be 500 for very long. I think he actually starts for Chicago.
I like both our first basemen here, so I'll give you the floor on the first one here.
You picked the Bubba and the Blue mascot pretty much. I went Garrett Cooper. More of just so I like Cooper. I like the skills himself, but more of just a point, at least this early in draft season, how stagnant the free agent market has been. Free agents I'm seeing right now are going later than they should be because obviously they don't have a team. Like Eddie Rosario comes to mind. I think these guys will sign on somewhere. Definitely will sign on somewhere, maybe even in regular gigs. Who knows? But Garrett Cooper is one who, any longtime listener to the show, someone we both really liked on the Marlins last year. All he needs to do is just sign with the team and his ADP will go up. Cooper right now is going obviously outside the top 500. I don't even have the ADP pulled up. That's how prepared I am for this. So I'll come back to Cooper's ADP. But yeah, you took the mascot.
It's like our boy Rowdy Tellez. I'm back in on this Pittsburgh Pirate thing. A couple things. Like we kind of knew it last year. He was playing hurt. He's already come out talking about it in an interview. Plus, you're getting him at an ADP of 509. That's going to go up as well. This reminds me of so much with Rowdy in Pittsburgh of like when Carlos Santana went there, and everyone kind of like, oh, it's Carlos Santana. He's done. He's had some bad years, and he goes there and he goes and hits like 15 to 20 home runs, hits like 240. Does just enough to be good. That's all Rowdy needs to do with this ADP. And if he finally gets healthy again, he could do even more. Like he could be pumping balls in the Allegheny, and he would not be shocked. So I like it's a new lease on life for Rowdy. He's hopefully healthy. ADP's cheap. Like this is legit a first baseman that might actually start for his team, and you're getting him past ADP 500. That's hard to find starters like that.
Yep, agreed.
This next one is going to get entertaining. So who you got for second base?
I didn't know this. Garrett Cooper's ADP, by the way, is like 606. So there's that. This guy's ADP is even worse, even later. I didn't know I'd have multiple Andrew Monasterio.
I know this is a good show. He's maybe a cover boy if I made a cover anymore.
Jesus. I wonder if you search his name, what would even show up? But Andrew Monasterio, second base and third base eligible. Everyone loves Tyler Black. As a kind of trendy pick to take over the third base job in Milwaukee. Maybe that happens at some point in 2024. Probably does. But to what I was talking about, if you need a cheap late backup who's eligible second, third, middle corner, who at least now, as of now, should start. We put an upside of Monasterio of 20 stolen bases in the forecaster. Gets on base. It's got a walk rate, which I know we don't care too much in NFBC leagues, but it does mean there's some chance that he can carve out semi-regular playing time. So that combination of like some speed, some playing time in the late 40s, like again, it's not a super exciting name, but none of these names in the 40s are that exciting. So that's why I'm throwing him out there.
Yep, shots in the dark. I'm going to Xavier Edwards, Miami Marlins, 24-year-old prospect guy. He plays a lot of second base, but also can play shortstop. And I think this is one of those where they got John Birdie playing shortstop right now. I think we all can agree he's not really an everyday ball player. This could be a spot for Xavier Edwards to find his way into that everyday lineup. Tons of speed. We're talking 30 to 40 steal upside. If he plays regularly, kind of like Birdie, a little bit of pop as well. So taking a late dart on a middle infield option like that, I'm a fan. ADP of 531 right now. So yeah, Xavier Edwards is the guy I was looking at there.
Like it. Chris Blessing gave his blessing for Xavier Edwards on our forecaster show last week.
Yep. I forgot all about that. I feel bad now. But yes. Who you got at shortstop? I love this guy. He helped me win some titles last year.
Kyle Farmer. We talk a lot in season about multiple paths to playing time. These guys are going to get hurt. Anyone who had any Minnesota Twin last year will know, like the Twins have injury problems, and I don't think that just goes away. 2024, Kyle Farmer played 45 games at second base, 43 at third, 40 at shortstop. So obviously he's not only eligible at all those positions for 2024, but he can then thus fill in when Royce Lewis gets injured in 2024. So I just think the multiple pass for Kyle Farmer plus some pretty good pop is a decent bet at his current ADP of that's Buck Farmer. Jesus. 523. Yeah. Buck Farmer, if anyone cares, has actually been drafted into
looking for a closer, huh?
Buck Farmer.
Jesus. Yeah, when you have an infield of Polanco, Correa, and Royce Lewis, there will be past the playing time for Kyle Farmer. He might play over 100 games. There's a legit chance. And like I said, I kind of joked about it, but I had him in both my winning DC teams. Like I loved Kyle Farmer because that multi-position eligibility is tremendous. He's the Luis Rengifo light. It's pretty nice. It wouldn't be a show if I didn't do it, so I had to do it. Next guy, Elvis Andrus. This is purely a dart late. He's 35, gonna be 36. He's a guy that continues to come in and some of these cheap teams love veterans. It's the way it goes. He's played over 100 games in 5 straight seasons if you don't count 2020. That's pretty good. Still can run 12 more steals last year, 6 homers, 251 average. He can produce, and he's going nearly pick 700. And he's got second base shortstop eligibility. So if you want a late round dart, hope he gets signed somewhere and runs into some playing time. A lot of us joked about it is why didn't the White Sox sign him instead of Paul DeJong? Like, what are we doing? Yeah, so agreed. Elvis Andrus will find a home somewhere, and then someone just has to get hurt, and he will play more than you think. So it'll happen still.
In a similar vein to what I was saying with Garrett Cooper. It's just like a free agent who probably is going to get signed somewhere, but hasn't yet. So thus his price is extremely cheap.
100% agree. Who's your third baseman?
Third base. This is more of just leaning on folks that know prospects. And I'm going to go Justin Henry Malloy of Detroit, who is third base eligible in the NFBC and is, I don't know if rumor's the right word, but could very well get some playing time in the outfield for Detroit. Detroit recently, or there was something that came out that said Matt Vierling might be their everyday third baseman.
Saw that.
I know Corbin Young on our forecaster episode was pretty high in Vierling. I just think there's multiple paths to playing time with Malloy. Kind of what I was saying with Farmer. I think he could usurp Vierling at third base by himself. So already, I mean, and has nothing. 611. Like the playing time, I think will be there. I trust the prospect guys on the evaluation side. 611 plate appearances for Justin Henry Malloy at AAA last year. Like, I mean, what are they going to do?
Got nothing less to prove, folks.
He's coming up. So he'll play, and the ADP is obviously super cheap since he's on this list. 546 ADP.
Yeah, mine is an oldie but goodie. It's going to work one day, right? But at least you don't have to pay for him this year. Nick Senzel. Nick Senzel has an ADP of 530. He's third base outfield eligible, and he has a new home in Washington. This is a team. This is why we like, and no, I am not comparing him to C.J. Abrams, but why we like guys like that go there, because there's no one else to move him out of the way. Like, as long as he can stay healthy, there's no reason why Senzel shouldn't play at least 120 games if he stays. That's if staying healthy. Like, he has never done that. That's my point. But at that point in the draft, if you need a third base outfield guy, it's a corner infield outfield guy. That's a lot of flexibility that late in the draft. That is at least going to start the season as a starting third baseman for the Nationals. They've already said that. Like, they want him to be the everyday third baseman. There's a lot of value to that point for me at ADP 530.
Yeah, it sounds like Washington's going to have him stick at third base. So
yeah, they want him to be their dude. So like, they tried Carter Kieboom enough. It did not work. So it's Nick Senzel season.
Yep. I like it. And again, he'll get hurt, but this is a late throw. Like, you're aiming for anything. We threw a couple outfielder spots on our all 500 team. I went with Hunter Goodman, who could very well, I think, break camp with the Colorado Rockies, which is always an interesting from a fantasy standpoint, at least from a streaming standpoint. Hunter Goodman, there's some swing and miss, but there's also 70 home runs over the last 2 seasons in the minors. So I think the power is big time. I think I know he's going to hit in a park that, from a park factor standpoint, will help Hunter Goodman's batting average, and he might even start on the team. And so if you can get somebody who plays in Coors with the power that Hunter Goodman has going at 515 ADP, I think, what I was saying about outfielders at the beginning of the episode, if you're looking for a 9th, 10th, 11th outfielder, I think Goodman is a good man to do that. I'm
proud of you on that one. For me, I'm going with Kyle Isbell, kind of a cheat sheet. I believe it was Alan that mentioned it on one of last week's HQ shows. The 15-15 upside. The talent is there. The playing time is a question. The playing time should be there this year. At least some point in the season, it should show up for Olivares is out of the way now. That's a big plus. It's one less mouth to feed. Isbell's ADP 622 over the last month. He's gone as high as 506, so that is coming up. But I do like the upside there for sure.
Joe Arico in the chat throws Jason Hayward out there, which I really like. And again, a broken record, but like free agent. That's why a lot of the reason why the price is suppressed. Hayward, I could get behind that.
610
ADP for
He's
Jason
gone as high
Hayward.
as 461 though. So I'm just doing the last month of drafts. Maybe since he signed with the Dodgers, he's creeping up. So something to think about.
15 homers, 270 batting average, 269 batting average last year in partial playing time. So
for sure,
I like it. This guy I'll never quit, my second outfielder, and he barely squeaked in, but it's Tyrone Taylor. I think Tyrone Taylor is really good. He's just never, between a combination of injuries and just roster squeeze in Milwaukee, he's never quite been able to hold down a regular role. And I don't think that's for certain at all in 2024, but I think there's a chance. Tyrone Taylor in the second half last year was really good. 10 home runs, 6 stolen bases. And the reason why I'm using for a second half split for Tyrone Taylor is he was hurt. His elbow was messed up in the first half. Once he got healthy, he looked like Tyrone Taylor again. So I think, again, outside ADP 500, I think Tyrone Taylor, you may not get the regular playing time, but I think the playing time you do get will be pretty damn efficient from your 9th outfielder.
I had a hunch you'd pick him. That's a good one. It's very much a good one. I'm going with one of the Fighting Palacioses. Talked about them a lot last year on my Fab shows and everything. I love what these guys do. One of them's obviously on St. Louis. The other brother is on Pittsburgh. Joshua Palacios is who I'm mentioning here. ADP of around 640 right now. Again, looks like he's going to platoon with Edward Olivares since that trade happened. But in 3 levels, between 2 levels in the minors and the bigs last year, 18 homers, 10 steals, hit about 260. So there's some pop, there's some speed, decent average. It's Pittsburgh. He should play, at least versus righties. So the strong side of a platoon. To get a strong side of a platoon that late, and maybe it turns into everyday playing time. That could be big. So Joshua Palacios is a late round outfielder that I'm a big fan of.
I like it. Both, I'll never be able to tell those two apart, the Palacios bros, but as a combined entity, they were pretty damn good.
Yes, they were. They were September fun. Those are the Fab guys that just kind of take you home right there.
Yep.
Who you got a starting pitcher?
I've got someone. This is a little bit of a Chris Clegg shout out. But Cade Cavalli for Washington had a ton of prospect hype when he first got called up, and obviously blew his arm out. Underwent Tommy John surgery in March. So no, we're not getting a full season from Cade Cavalli. I don't think he would even hold up to a full season workload at this point. But it's one of those timing things that I just kind of said earlier on is like I just took him actually in our draft and hold in the 42nd round. What you're hoping for here is a midseason return when presumably you've got 3 or 4 starting pitchers or more injured. You're going to get kind of an in-season boost from Cavalli, again, assuming everything goes well with the rehab. I think the skills are there. With Washington, he'll get to pitch if he's healthy. So count on nothing from Cavalli in the first half, but I think in the second half could be a nice little boost once half your rotation has red shit next to him.
Don't blame you one bit there. My first one is Luis Medina. Talked about him earlier. I know it's a guy we broke down on some blue boards, I believe, last year because there were signs of like the good, too many walks. That's his big issue. Like he's a 10 to 11% walk guy almost monthly looking at his logs. But he did have the month of July, which he had a sub-3 ERA. We saw the signs of life there. Then he got hurt, came back. It was never really the same. To me, it's just a combination of youth, ADP 573, between the minors and the bigs through about 125 innings last year. So he should get you to 140 plus. The A's should pitch him again. There's really no reason not to. So it's more the speculation of that ADP. Can he maybe make more adjustments as he gets older and more developed? Do we trust the A's to do that? That's another question. But at that point in the draft, he's a guy that's going to start every 5th day, barring an injury, and I'll take my chances there with Luis Medina.
Yeah, seems like a one skill away guy.
Yep, definitely. That's apparently what I am, according to some. So that's good.
Hey, at least it's only one.
It was a compliment.
Only one.
All right, I love your next guy, as people have probably got annoyed with me talking about him in September last year. But who's your second starting pitcher?
Yeah, it's Ryan Yarbrough. Like, not the flashiest name. This isn't some prospect or anything that like you're shooting the moon on. It's just somebody you're gonna need a body to hold together some innings in midseason, second half of the season. It's not so much Yarbrough himself. It's more the way the Dodgers used Ryan Yarbrough for fantasy wise was just super nice. Dude had in the second half last year, once he got going, 7 wins and 2 saves, 63 innings in the second half. So like not going to get a ton of Ks. Ratios will be like okay. But I think you can kind of luck into some wins, maybe a save or two from Ryan Yarbrough. And again, doesn't sound that great, but at the price you're getting Yarbrough, which is $598, I think that's a buy that just kind of makes sense to hold your staff together late in the draft.
Yeah, I love him. Like you mentioned, he was getting wins, he was getting saves, he was just the glue guy. It felt like so.
Yeah,
big fan of what you can get from Yarbrough. You never know. My next guy's a pure spec thing. It felt a lot better before the Royals signed Michael Wacha and Seth Lugo. That's Alec Marsh. This is a guy that he's ADP 710 right now. Probably gonna start the season in the minor, but what we saw late in the year with him is a lot of opener situations, and he started racking up strikeouts. That's what I was a big fan of. And if you kind of try to find something to toy with, you go with that. K rate was 25% in the second half. Yeah, in August, a 27% K rate. Still walks too many guys. That's a youth thing. We know that very well. But he kept the ball in the ballpark in the second half, much better than in the first half. A lot of things pointed to some serious improvements with Marsh. And he also threw almost 135 to 140 innings. I have to do the math, but somewhere in that ballpark last year. Another thing that points to like, hey, first injury, he should be the next guy up type situation. So I like Alec Marsh in here. Maybe Brady Singer's not as good as I thought. So here comes Alec Marsh. But late in the draft, pick 710, like one of your last picks. I'll take a chance on a guy with big time strikeout upside that if he comes back and they use the opener again, could get you wins a lot easier than you think. So I like it.
Finally coming around on Brady Singer.
I said maybe.
Like to hear it. Prefaced it with maybe. I like that. I think a big takeaway too is don't get too down on guys that don't start the year with, in the majors. Your starters that you draft in a draft and hold, this isn't earth shattering or anything. They're more likely to be healthy at the beginning of the season than the end of the season. So you're not going to need someone like Alec Marsh in April. You are going to need someone like Alec Marsh in June, July, August, when those injuries do start piling up. So good example of that.
All right. Who's your reliever? Because I like this one quite a bit.
Mr. Jeff Hoffman of the Philadelphia Phillies. There's a lot of talk around Jose Alvarado, who I do think in that bullpen is the top guy now, but struggled performance-wise and with injuries from time to time last year. Orion Kettering is a sexy name to back up Alvarado, but hasn't thrown that many major league innings, so who knows? Jeff Hoffman last year threw 52 innings of a 2.41 ERA, 0.9 whip, with a 33% strikeout rate, 17% swinging strike, and threw his fastball 3 miles an hour faster, went from 94 miles an hour to 97 last year. This is someone who reinvented themselves with Philly last year. I wonder if he went to Driveline. I have no idea. But Jeff Hoffman, I think, is someone like in the last couple rounds of your draft. Again, worst case, you can just throw him in there for a week of ratios. And best case, he ascends to the closer role. Like, I just don't think there's that many roadblocks in Philadelphia right now.
Yeah, I really like that as a potential closer option for the fact that in the postseason he was starting to get used in those big boy leverage spots late too. Like they kind of showed their hand there in my mind. I could be totally wrong, but it definitely is something to look at. And it's amazing what happens when you leave Colorado and things change for your life. It's a big thing for Jeff Hoffman. My guy, mentioned him earlier, but it literally has been a draft and hold target since I started NFBCs like 2 or 3 years ago. Griffin Jacks. Talked about him already. I love him. ADP around 509, but he's the next in line on a pretty good Minnesota team. He's going to get strikeouts. Ratios will be there. I love Griffin Jackson. And he's one of the guys we talk about, picking relievers over a bad starter for the week. He will usually pitch in like at least 4 games a week, 3 to 4 games a week. So he's going to get you chances because if there's any type of a close game, he's one of the first names called late in the game with Johan Duran. Like he's going to get his innings, which just boosts things. Like if he somehow puts 4 scoreless innings together with like 5 Ks, maybe sneaks a winner or save in there, that's huge. So he's a guy I love in these formats.
Get that handcuff, that second cuff.
Yep, second cuff. You got to know what to do with that second cuff. All right, but that's just a handful of post 500 ADP guys. Obviously, there's many, many more. Like Joe Rico mentioned Hayward. That's a great one. There's many more. It'll be fun to even look back at this exercise in a month because Ryan and I before the show, and we kind of hinted at it throughout this, just from like our early draft to like now, the ADPs are already getting tighter and tighter. It's getting tougher and tougher. Now it's like round 25. It starts getting murky out there because it's so tight. Like I'm typing in names that we mentioned here in other drafts that I'm in, like pick 400. Most of these guys are already gone. Like some of these guys are disappearing. It's not warm and fuzzy right now trying to decipher the masses here. But got a couple listener questions if you want to attack them. Got some.
Do it.
All right. Let's have some fun here. You guys came through. I know listener questions are tough this time of year, so we appreciate you. But the old Anthony Gialdi, I don't know if he's still around, but he had a couple questions. What's the most radical early strategy you have tried, and how did you feel about it after the draft?
It's a good question. In DC, I'm much more likely to do it in like gladiators and DCs, but I don't know. Probably the most radical is waiting till like the 6th or 7th. I've done this a few times. Wait till 6th or 7th round to get your first pitcher,
Yep.
and then just like go 6, 7 in a row.
Yeah,
because you need to make up for the volume. That's something that I have tried, but I don't know. I kind of play these pretty straight, just because again I'm somewhat using them as draft prep.
Yeah, I don't go too crazy, but it would be waiting on pitchers till like I'd say even like pick round 9 or 10, really start to get into that glob, and then go like 3 or like 4 right away. Just pepper that mid tier. Doesn't feel great. To answer your question, Gialdi, does not feel great. If you haven't tried anything uncomfortable, why not? How do you know unless you try it? Valid point. Second cuff, Gialdi.
I went 2 years without cutting my hair during COVID, so that was uncomfortable.
I've gone about 20 years with not needing to get a haircut, so we're good there.
Go.
The second part can be used in either or situations. If you haven't tried anything uncomfortable, why not? Feel free to use it as a conversation where it warrants. Yeah, I think it's more we just kind of play it safe because that's our draft strategy. It's a good point. We might want to try different things, but I guess for me, I'll let you have the floor after this, is the way I know I'm building my team here, because the depth pieces I need won't necessarily be the way I build a fab team, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of hard to I love to use these to get ready for our draft season, but at the same time to build this team in my mind to be competitive, I'm going to draft it differently than I would a fab team.
Yeah, I know one example of that is I'm going to be more balanced in these draft and holds just because you have to be. Whereas in fab leagues, I'm probably going to draft, and I do this almost every fab league. I'm drafting my 10th, 11th starting pitcher before I'm drafting my final couple hitter slots, just because in fab leagues, there's no starting pitching available, but there are hitters. So that's one difference.
Steve Brunn asks, Bubba, how often do you remind Ryan of your wins? Is it subtle jabs, or do you go straight for the throat?
Well, he went straight to the heart a couple minutes ago there. Jesus.
It's a subtle jab thing. It's not that often. Pretty quiet about it until Ryan brings it up and sparks my memory. And then we might talk about it. But I'm not a college-educated guy, so I don't remember a lot of things.
That's right. That's right. Now, but to answer the question for Bubba, he's pretty humble about these wins. So I in promoting this show today on Twitter, I said, don't listen to anything I say. Listen to what Bubba says, because he won these last two. You wouldn't puff your chest out like that. So I do it for you.
No, my stomach's already puffed out enough, so we're good. Last question we have here is from MS at SMMS79. Good to have him back after a little
that's right.
break.
Yep, absolutely.
We kind of answered this earlier, but I'll mention again. He says, how do you think it's best to approach relief pitchers and saves late? Last year, I tried locking up a bunch of arms from the same team, and it worked out very poorly for me.
Mm-hmm.
How do you choose where to throw your darts? I have a thought on this, but what do you have?
I mean, I don't know. We talked about handcuffing, so that is an option. I think like the Jeff Hoffman example is a good one. When I was saying the post 500 is get someone with skills.
Bingo.
Because worst case, you can just throw him in and he's not going to hurt you. Preferably on a team that either has a bad closer or has some ambiguity in the closer role, like with Philadelphia.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like, you can take some of those teams, but I mentioned, like, I took MacArthur and Puck around 25. After that, all my closers, like Griffin Jack's, potential guy, but good peripherals, like you mentioned. Andrew Nardi, he's like the 7th inning guy, but he had massive ratios and strikeouts with win upside. He's in Miami. Hector Neris, he's like 3rd in line, but they're like the skill set, tremendous. Barring any more injuries, you got something there. Those are kind of the things I'm looking at when it comes to pitching that late. You can find saves guys, there's no doubt about it. But when you're going too deep, I'd rather just get the guys I know are good that can get me ratio strikeouts. Maybe almost look for guys that might get me more wins per se than saves. That's kind of how I would look at it in the later rounds. You know, like in the later rounds, let's just say this much, like 5 saves at the end of the year, awesome. Like you're over the moon in that scenario. Don't be looking for the next 20 save guy because there might be one of them in the entire draft that late. And you're just going to go crazy about it.
Especially what we saw last year. Like there just were not many of these guys. And sometimes these guys that do pop up and get those 20 saves aren't even drafted in these draft and holds.
Like, beauty of it too. It doesn't
as crazy as that sounds.
It's great. But that's why like Ryan's guy, Ryan Yarborough, is great later in the draft because he can help you in so many different ways. He might run into like 4 or 5 saves, might run into 4 or 5 wins, might get you a handful of strikeouts. He's going like 3 to 4 innings at a pop. Hopefully ratios stay good. There's a lot that Ryan Yarborough could help your team with compared to some other guys late in drafts. And that's kind of something to look at. And you're also, maybe he goes back to the rotation this year and things change. Who knows? But those are the kind of things you got to speculate on. Like I speculate on Alec Marsh thinking, hey, maybe they'll open for him again. That's pretty cool. Let's play that game. Things along those lines. So, yeah. You're doing so much speculation late in the draft. That's just the bottom line. You're hoping for things like Ryan talked about prospects late because you're not expecting them to help you out until maybe the second half of the year. That's all you're hoping for. Yeah. And that's just the name of the game.
Yep.
All right. Final thoughts as we wrap things up on tonight's episode.
I want to jump into a new draft and hold now.
Hey.
Thought we covered a lot of good stuff. So and hopefully some names for everyone out there. If you guys have questions, if you're jumping into the format new, just hit either of us up. Happy to help. And looking forward to duking out our top 20 starters next show.
Yep, that'll be fun. That was a fun episode last year. It's kind of nice, that we've done this a few years now. We can almost just go back to our yearly shows because there's a lot of fun behind them. And the top 20 starting pitching show was good because it got not just between us. There was a lot of talk on Twitter based on like, you guys have Brandon Woodruff so high, Aaron Nola so high. Well, Woodruff got hurt. Nola,
you have Cole ahead of Burns. What?
Yeah. Hey, I'll take that one all day long, folks. But we'll talk about that on Thursday night. That'll be fun because shocker, still don't have Burns that high. But you can find Ryan on Twitter at RyanBHQ, the podcast at Bubba Bloom Pod. I'm on Twitter at BDintric. Until next time, Bubba the Bloom, episode 92. Catch y'all later.